Well, yeah, you said it at the beginning of the episode. The biggest change in this year's World Cup is that it's going to be in the winter
Yeah,
season, November, December time. Now, I don't like that
because
because
we're university
I really
students.
want to spend. No, it's not even that. I'm going to Canada. I'm going to be watching the World Cup final at like
And for
11 a.m., 10 a.m. I have classes, I have finals at the time. I mean, imagine spending it this summer with all your friends and families, and especially for students like us who've just graduated high school this year. I mean, what a send-off that would have
yeah,
been. But yeah, that's the biggest change of this year's World Cup. It's going to be in the winter time, December time. Uh,
and,
how do you think this is going to affect players, especially the top players going into this World Cup? And they are going to be leaving the season at a very significant time. They would have probably played 3 or 4 Champions League group stage games, and the Premier League teams and English team would have been well way on their journey on the EFL Cup and beginning the FA Cup soon. And the tables across the Europe's top 5 leagues would begin to shape up. You're talking about 2-3 months down the line where players are going to be leaving a very important time of the season, because this is where you can probably cement yourself as, like last year, for example, Manchester City, even though Liverpool caught up, but you can see around December time, City have won the league. Madrid around December time, Madrid have won the league.
yeah, yeah. A very
Paris, same
decisive
thing with
period. A
Germany.
very decisive period.
So this is very
Yeah.
key. What do you think, or how do you think, for example, in the Premier League, that the English FA have asked the top 6 clubs, or have asked the Premier League, let's say, not to organize any games against the top 6 a week or 2 before the World Cup, before they enter the World Cup squads and begin their training session with the World Cup teams, because they don't want any clashes. How do you think that's going to affect other teams in Spain, for example, and Italy and France and Germany? They're going to go into the World Cup. Do you think teams are going to listen to each individual FA and follow by their policies and their rules and regulations? Oh, we need this player for the World Cup. Don't play him the next 2 weeks. You can bring him off the bench. There's going to be specific asks and questions. So what do you think? What do you think about that?
I think a massive responsibility there, and for every club, they absolutely should listen to the FA, each specific FA that applies a rule. It's in the best interest of the players for their World Cup glory, particularly teams which have players, multiple players which share a common nationality. They'll definitely be loud with their voices, and they'll definitely push on the board of their relative club to, I guess, accept the rules of each FA, and therefore organize games against non-top 6 teams or avoid playing them excessively. I think the biggest effect of the World Cup happening at such a different time, especially at such a decisive time, is the effect on club football, not on the World Cup.
Yeah.
The only effect I see happening in terms of the World Cup is, if anything, all players are going to play better than they would have in the summer. Their individual performances are going to be better. They'd be fitter. They won't be as exhausted as if they were to play it in the summer, because it wouldn't be after such a massive season. Rather, it would be, during the season. And we tend to see that a lot of the time, such as we saw with Mo Salah when he scored double-digit goals before Christmas. Was it the 2 seasons ago? We tend to notice
Last season.
Oh, last season, yeah. We tend to notice that a lot of players reach their prime, their relative prime of that specific season around the time which the World Cup will take place this year, which is November, December. That's when they are performing their absolute best in that relative season. So that will translate into the World Cup. Each player will perform very well for their relative nation. I think that's a good thing for every nation, I guess. Every nation will therefore see an improvement in their performance. It'll be a much more competitive World Cup. But that's the only effect on the World Cup. The biggest effect, like you mentioned, is club football. That first of all, we've seen a massive structural change for the season. The season started significantly earlier than it should have. The first Premier League game was played on August 5th, way earlier than it should be played, at least 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
The AFL games are obviously going to be designed a bit differently in terms of how they are drawn.
They're starting tonight.
Exactly, yeah, and that shouldn't be the case at all. They start much later. The Champions League, usually, if the World Cup wasn't to take place, we would see the Champions League already be decided in terms of the round of 16 by the end of that time period. We are now noticing that the group stages will be played earlier, but still somehow run longer than they should, because the World Cup is going to stop that time span significantly. That will affect club football. Now, it will also, beyond the structural change, affect how clubs perform after the World Cup. Whoever doesn't perform well individually will have a significant drop. Obviously, this is relative. This isn't guaranteed. But will likely have a significant drop in their form for the rest of the season. If, for example, we saw this with Mo Salah. When he lost that African Cup final, he was different after that. We didn't see the same player. He wasn't that great. I know he still ended up winning. He ended up winning the Golden Boot. He tied with Son, right? But if he won the final, I think he would have ran away with the Golden Boot. He would have competed for the Ballon d'Or with Benzema. He might have changed the outcome of the Champions League final. I'm not even joking. The confidence to a player. I don't think anyone realizes this. Confidence to a football player makes or breaks their performance. There are players who are exceptional, and with confidence they prove that. But when they don't have confidence, I promise you, they play in a way as if they've never touched the ball in their life. Confidence really damages a player. Whoever doesn't perform well in the World Cup, this will translate to the rest of their season or the next foreseeable 2-3 months after the World Cup as a result of the World Cup. On the other hand, whoever performs really well in the World Cup, maybe leads their team to glory or bags a lot of goals or assists, or just has a brilliant consistency with their performances, they'll likely carry that through to their club. They'll carry that through after the World Cup, and we may even see it affect how teams perform. Usually, like you said, by December into January, we see some teams run away with the league. However, depending on the World Cup, whoever runs away with it might not run away with it, because other teams might perform very well or very bad, depending on who their players are and which nation their players come from. That's how it'll affect it. Yeah.